I should say that in a sense we're actually launching two books, because there's a new book, Perfected Fables Now, but the other amazing news is that, I'll show it to you, My Strangled City has just been republished in a new edition by People Tree Press. So we're launching a new book and relaunching a classic in a sense. So I'm going to hand over in a second to Jeremy Pointing, who is going to be basically your host this afternoon. But I just wanted to say, just on behalf of the festival, really, and all of us who work on the festival, and also on behalf of, his many ex-students and colleagues and admirers, that, our gratitude to Gordon Rohlehr for allowing us to launch the book during the festival this year. I think many more years ago than I would like to acknowledge, I think the very first class I did on my very first day as a literature student at UWI was Professor Rohlehr's Introduction to Poetry. That was in another century. And I think like many impressionable young people who found themselves sitting in a classroom with him, they were immediately spellbound. We've got some people in the audience here who I think are probably positively, adorers of Gordon Rohlehr. He's, as we all know, he's a literary scholar, literary critic, a great writer on calypso. Probably the person who's made us, most take calypso seriously as a form of literature, as a form of social commentary. He's a great Brathwaite man. We're going to hear a Brathwaite poem a bit later today. But also, he's just simply one of the great Caribbean essayists, one of the great essayists of any Caribbean generation. And we are absolutely delighted the new book is going to make its appearance at the festival today. Jeremy Pointing, who of course is the founder of People Tree Press and the editor of the book, is going to now tell you a bit about it, and then join Gordon Rohlehr and Kendall Hippolyte for a conversation. There'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions, and then we have some entertaining bits planned for the end, because we want to make sure we end the festival this year in exactly the right style. So everyone, thank you very much, and please welcome Jeremy Pointing.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for sustaining your energy right till the end. We were beginning to flag, but the enthusiasm here is very palpable. Let me just take you back a long time. A house in Leeds, a semi-detached house in Leeds, and through the door would come these little rolled-up newspapers. Tapia would come through the door. Moco would come through the door. New Beginning would come through the door. Occasionally, East Dry River would come through the door, which was a bit irregular. And it was in those things that the name of Gordon Rohlehr first hit me, and realizing then that something very special was going on. Here were utterly scholarly essays, footnoted and everything, and they were appearing in papers with, so there at this kind of time, there is probably the biggest audience for literary criticism that's probably ever existed in the region. So there were some tremendously important things going on there, and that was the start. So I share the kind of immense enthusiasm I felt when Nicholas was introducing the thing, of being, of Gordon, of being somebody who I've admired hugely ever, from that first time. He tells, I've forgotten completely about it. He told me that I'd written to him in 1972. Oh my God! So this is the man. I mean, I've forgotten completely. I don't know what I asked him or anything like that, but he's. And this is quite astonishing, the kind of, one of the themes I think we'll talk about a little bit is about kind of the kind of recurrent amnesia that I think quite a few of the sessions at Bocas have been exploring, And here is Gordon, who has in his archive a letter some totally unknown Englishman wrote to him in 1971. God knows what it was about, but but there you go. Yeah, so let me just say a little bit about Perfected Fables, because I think it's, I mean, I don't think I need to sell the book, and I'm horribly afraid that the book is disappearing from the book stands rapidly, and we promise that we'll hurry some more copies over as soon as the booksellers place some more orders. But it's an archetypal Gordon Rohlehr collection. It does all the things that one looks for. I think, one of the things that being here these last 4 or 5 days, so many of the kind of issues that people have wanted to discuss are discussed with great kind of insight in essays in the book. The very first thing on the very first morning, the discussion about, where are things going wrong and so on, that education came into it. There's a brilliant essay in the book about education and calypso. It starts off by looking at how how splendid and kind of imaginative Eric Williams' initial ideas about education were, and then how badly those ideas failed in actual practice. And the way Gordon does it is explore it through the way calypsonians sung about all those kinds of issues around education and the kind of education people were getting. So it does those two things at once. We've been talking about the ways in which things are forgotten. And one of the things I think is tremendously important about this book is it's a long view. And it's not just because people like Gordon and I and Kendall are all sort of getting in, in our 8th decade or wherever it is, remember things from back. And it's so important that the essays in here remind us that things just didn't suddenly happen yesterday. So you get those things where, one of the themes over Bocas from things has been the issue of crime. And yet, if you read Gordon's essays about calypso, people were agitating about crime in the 1950s in exactly the same kind of way. And it's that kind of depth of kind of field that I think make the thing so important. There are 3 brilliant essays about Walcott, Naipaul, Earl Lovelace. And you think, so much has been said about these people, and yet, these are essays that really, they're summative essays that go to the heart of why those 3 writers are so important. The essay about Walcott, you cannot not read because it says so much about why Walcott is so important, at the same time as kind of acknowledging, that Walcott wasn't a god, that Walcott has his kind of areas where, you'd wished he might have been other, but it tells us just so much why we appreciate that. There's one of the other things that he does in it, there's a nice little introduction to a small anthology of poetry that appeared sometime, probably in about the 90s. I have the thing. I think Raymond Ramcharitar edited it and so on. And it's that thing where Gordon is always prepared to stick his neck out and say, and take notice of things. And one of the things sometimes I'd critique academia for, is they wait for external approval before things become canonical and so on. And one of the qualities of Gordon's work, it's there in My Strangled City and so on, is that close attention to things that other people were not necessarily paying any attention to and giving them serious kind of consideration. There's, I think one of the things that there is, we're going to talk about this a little bit, but there is a kind of continuing radical vision that extends right through. It's an extremely, I think, realistic one. So that, for instance, Gordon is not fooled by things like globalization. What is globalization? It's imperialism with another name. And those are those kinds of qualities. One of the really nice things, and we're going to begin, I'm going to ask Gordon to read a little bit from that. you deduce Gordon from the writing. He very rarely appears in person in the writing. But there's a very nice essay that's called, Nice and Yeats Kind of Thing Amongst School Children, which I think was delivered to school children in Guyana at some point, some anniversary of independence, I think 50th anniversary? 50th anniversary of independence, where he reflects on his own schooling, primary schooling, licks, and and going to Queen's College and that kind of that good colonial education. So I'm going to ask Gordon to come up first of all and read a little bit from that, and then is that right? Yeah. And then we'll all join and start having a conversation. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
You're right.
Yes. Okay. First of all, I want to thank Bocas for creating this occasion and for inviting me to be here. I'd like to thank Jeremy for publishing that collection. Since I retired, I've been writing all sorts of things. And the problem is how to put them together where they would make sense. And I've worried about it and made up lists and so on. And then suddenly this opportunity arose in which I was reacting to a whole relay of deaths, really, the passing of friends, of family, and of our writers, our calypsonians, and then Derek Walcott passes, and I think of that poem, In a Green Night, the orange tree in various light, proclaims perfected fables now that its last season's summer height bends from each overburdened bough. And I said, okay, that's the title, Perfected Fables Now. These people have written, they have lived their lives, they have told their truths or their lies, but whatever it is, a cycle has closed. And I've always been very fascinated by cycles, by the closure of cycles. So Perfected Fables Now became the title. And then there's the subtitle, A Bookman Signs Off on 7 Decades. Where did this figure of the bookman occur? The figure of the bookman occurred when I tried to piece myself together. Quite often, and after I write these things, I don't read them for years. So I don't know, in a sense, what I have been writing. And as one gets older, one simply forgets what one has been writing. So I started to try to ask the question, who is this fellow? I adopted one major device, that of using my 3 names. I don't know why they gave me 3 names, but I figured whenever you go for a passport or you have to face the immigration officer, you have to put down what is your first name. And I go and put down Gordon, because that's what everybody calls me. But on my passport and my birth certificate, my first name is Daniel. Frederick Gordon. Gordon is nowhere, in fact. Can't even hold on the form. And so I said, well, I've been defined by immigration officers, both in Guyana and in Trinidad, as having a first name of Daniel. So I created this character, Daniel. And I made him a dreamer, as he is in the Bible, and an interpreter of dreams. And Frederick, I had a great deal of problems with Frederick. I simply don't know who Frederick is. Frederick is a silent kind of fella. He retreats. He's introspective, narcissistic, and very gloomy too. Very, 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 very pessimistic. So, okay, Frederick is there in the middle. He's always grumbling about something. And then there's Gordon. Gordon, what does Gordon do? Gordon does all the hard work. These days I call him a canine de-excretizer. Gordon does all the hard work. And so I have these three figures. Daniel, I call him Daniel Lyons then, because Daniel is always getting into trouble. And, well, Frederick is also, I suppose, Lyons then, and Gordon. And I give them backgrounds and they express moods. And I moved from that to writing I don't know what you call this, but it's a thing I call musings, mazes, muses, margins. And I include dreams as a way of finding out who all these characters are inside. And I try to develop a thesis too of life in Trinidad as being theater. All the time, theater. Everything that happens is theater. The politics is theater. And okay, and I then ask myself, well, who am I in this great mass? And I realized that I was probably the bookman. The bookman who comes at the end of the devil band. Now, my bookman, Jeremy said he is on a mission from the devil. You know, he's been granted permission by the devil to do certain things. I don't know about the devil. My bookman is just simply a chronicler. He's an archivist. He writes things down. He doesn't judge anybody. He thinks that there are people who are going to do that. But so the bookman appeared, and I had, and more than that, the typeface, the font in which these things were written is bookman. So that I know Jeremy is a wicked kind of fella. He seized on that, you know, and he made the book a bookman's book. And I want to read my definition of the bookman. I have chosen as one of my recurrent narrating voices and consciousnesses that carnival character who comes at the end of the devil band's parade of devils, imps, and dragons, the bookman. Traditionally, the bookman records the names of the dead, and some say provides a catalogue of their deeds for the final judges of these things. My bookman is simply a recorder of things, a voice defying amnesia. That's important because I forget things all the time. So the bookman is very necessary there. A voice defying amnesia that speaks from the border and the margin of everywhere. A permanent outsider, like the wanderer or seafarer of Anglo-Saxon epic, or like Derek Walcott's living dead calypsonian spoiler. a ghost in brown gabardine who sits high, that is, intoxicated and elevated, on the hill of Laventille, overlooking city, countryside, and Gulf. My bookman is also an invisible spaceman hovering over Trinidad and Tobago in Patrick Manning's blimp. Half deaf, as I am, half blind, not quite that. My bookman nevertheless listens to the nation's secret whispering. He thinks he has data on their foreign accounts. And as he surveys the lie of the land, he hears the people's language and feels their anguish. Double and brother to King David Rudder's magnificent madman, laying on the wall and edge of everything, everywhere. I, that is how I refer to the three of us. The three-person bookman is even now taking down your name. See if you recognize yourself somewhere in the steadily fading margins of his chronicle. So that kind of explains the subtitle, A Bookman Signs Off on 7 Decades. The question is, have I signed off on the 7 decades, or do I have more things to say? Well, I have tried to put together a sort of documentary account on what I call our ethnic feud, which is calypso Pekong versus chutney soca. And it's very interesting, it's very fascinating, and maybe it's the kind of thing that would land me in jail or out of Trinidad and Tobago, I don't know. But so I haven't totally signed off. Now, okay, that's one thing. Now, you wanted to know something about my educational background, high school background. I put down some notes on it. Again, as I say, I forget these things. Whether Queen's College was a shaping experience to me as a person, as a person, private and political. At the school, its teachers and the public were equally aware of Queen's College as a sort of center of excellence and a producer of quality, a shaper of future leaders. They told us we were going to be leading Guyana when the British left. Problem is the British never really left. My years were between 1953 and 1961, and they were crucial years in the emerging and explosive politics of the country. School stood at the center of a process of change in which patriotism was being steadily redefined and contained and contained among its staff, or the school contained among its staff, both stiffly starched colonials and a few rebels, radicals, and mouthers of new rhetoric. Some were socialists, some representative of ethnic and racial positions, and some tried to be both things, socialists and racists at the same time. And they were generally good friends with each other, that's the thing. Matters came to a head after I left school, during my first year at Mona, 61 to 62. Now, so that I don't know that the school shaped me and shaped my political consciousness. I think that after school, yes, there was a great deal of shaping taking place there. The school curriculum was British grammar school with frills attached. The frills were things like woodwork. I don't know if you have woodwork in British grammar schools, but we did woodwork. The poultry club. Well, I didn't need to do that because we had poultry at home, and I was, I was the person who was mainly responsible for taking care of the chickens. But still like chicks. Now the poultry, the poultry club disappeared when a few stray dogs went with the poultry. But there was a lot of music. There was drama. I sang as the sergeant, I think, of police in the Pirates of Penzance. Nice one. There was art appreciation in the sixth form, but there was no Caribbean history whatsoever, none. There was American history at A levels, and that was the closest one came to anti-colonialism and the idea of a new nation taking shape. One of my teachers in English, Mr. Clayton, an Englishman who had been to some sort of war, he used to run around the field every afternoon, shirt off. He used to train the rugby club, the rugby team. But a great guy. And he tried to prepare me for the UCWI Open Scholarship. Now, the UCWI Open Scholarship is a peculiar thing. It is not based on any written syllabus. So you're doing history, they would set you a set of questions, but not based on what you were studying at A levels. I don't know what they were testing. They had a general paper or something that seemed to test your general knowledge of world affairs, and it was discovered that I had no general knowledge of world affairs. So Mr. Clayton tried to groom me a little bit in that area, and for that I was very grateful. Then you had to be interviewed by a team from UWI. The team that interviewed me was headed by Professor Anamanthudu, medicine. He stayed at Mona for many years until they murdered his wife. All right. Professor Anamanthudu questioned me about the Haitian revolt. I never, why did Toussaint succeed when the others who had tried and so on failed? And I didn't have a clue, but I told him, I told him that it was perhaps the magnetism of Toussaint's personality, which Anamanthudu didn't let on that I was talking foolishness. And ultimately, I did win a scholarship to go to UE to do history. But I had twice gotten distinctions in literature. So I decided I would switch registration. But the professor of English, one Professor Croston, didn't believe that natives of the Caribbean could do English, could understand it, and that made me a little mad. So I decided, yes, I'm going to do it. So when I went before him, he asked me, why am I shifting? I told him I got a distinction in literature twice at A levels, and I got an open scholarship. and he couldn't stop me. I told him that. He threatened me by telling me that at the end of the term, they were setting an examination to eliminate all of those who were not worthy of being in the English honors class. That was the kind of thing. So I did the examination, and I passed the examination, and I continued to do English. Okay, so that may answer a bit of the question about, you know.
Well, do you want to sit down?
Yeah.
Do you want to sit or?
I can sit, yes, if that would help anybody.
Perhaps just to do a little sort of seed into Yeah, I mean, one of the things that perhaps just to lead into what Gordon is going to say, so we just break it up with some questions as well as answers, was that, I mean, it's very clear that in the section when he writes about Queen's College, that here is that he's talking about a school which is based on hierarchy, excellence, and a very definitely Eurocentric notion of what high culture is. Gordon makes a point at various times in other things about that this is precisely the kind of education that most of the Caribbean's leaders went through. It was also the education that you went through.
Yes, of course.
So it's kind of like, so I mean, one of the perhaps connect to the next kind of area. In the essay about calypso and education,
Yes.
you sort of focus on the fact that there's kind of been a sharp division between the idea of hierarchy in education and the kind of whole sort of examination system, scholarship system, and so on. Mm-hmm. And the fact that there has also been a kind of different the hierarchy of the street, yes, which is so kind of polar kind of opposites from that. And that so far, although, you know, Williams came up with the ideas about how you might actually develop a whole population, it didn't actually happen.
No, because because people would tell Williams or would say that the kind of education they wanted for the children was the same kind of education that produced Eric Williams, that made him you went through this education system and you became prime minister. Why do you want to deprive my child of that opportunity? So that there was a strong pushback from the population against the notion of, in a sense, democratizing education by creating junior, secondary, senior comprehensive schools that placed great emphasis on vocational training and that sort of thing. First of all, the population, I think, pushed back. Then there was the question of state-controlled schools as against church schools. And that led to a compromise in what is known as the Concord Act, which many people, again, were very suspicious of. They thought that this was to retain the old order. So Williams didn't succeed in that sense. But if you look at Trinidad today, there is a wide range of educational opportunity, and that was all there in education in the British West Indies, which was regarded as a blueprint for the entire West Indies who wanted to change their education. So I don't know that he failed, but where he may have failed is that you take a young fellow and you send him to one of the trade schools, the training schools, and he really doesn't want to go. And, you might even have to pay for him. He takes the money and he buys roti. No, this is serious. We've done this. And it's not that the opportunity does not exist, but he doesn't want to accept that opportunity. The other thing is what I call the curriculum of the street. And this comes out very powerfully in all sorts of calypsos. The curriculum of the school takes you in a particular direction, but the curriculum of the street takes you in quite a different direction. It has its own, what I call its certificate of bruises. It's about confrontation. It's about playing out this violence which is in us, I'm afraid, and has always been in us. And the more frustrated we get, and the hungrier we get, the more violent we become. But we don't attack any system. We attack each other. And I don't know how one changes that. But Sparrow's so-called Bajon calypsos and the class distinctions, the fire and brimstone up in Laventie. We are living on the hill. Some people come and move in by me. I was so happy on the hillside, I never had trouble. Till they build housing project and bring Shantytown people. Now you might think that Laventie and Shantytown is the same. But the fellow in Laventie is complaining about a drop in standards since people come from the swamp, literally, and they've come up the hill. And they cause all kinds of mayhem on the hill. Well, that's the culture of the street. And Sparrow's calypsos are all about that. The thing that one can read from Perfected Fables now is the section on the rebel. I don't know where to find that though. Sparrow's rebel. He has a calypso called The Rebel, in which a rebel is explaining how he became a rebel. And it's a fascinating calypso. Order Stanton one is murder, of course. Another very interesting calypso, because he has to prove to the jury that he is not guilty. He's been attacked by hoodlums. But then he has to prove to the jury of the street that he's just not a coward who is running from a fight. And he has to do both things. You think you found it? No. Yeah, you did. You see?
The value of having an index in it.
That's another thing. That's another thing, Jeremy put this book is a whole new book. This My Strangled City, because it has an index. It only had an endnotes before, and I am quite certain, knowing this generation of reader, that people are going to read the index and not read the essays. But the index is really good. I didn't know there was so much stuff inside this thing. Okay. In Royal Jail, this is 1961. Is that Royal Jail? Yes. In Royal Jail, the violence significantly extends towards even the Deputy Prime Minister himself an island scholar, a past participant in the party's program of consciousness-raising lectures, and the party's first Minister of Education was Dr. Solomon. One of the fascinating things about the early PNM was a program of volunteerism in which every weekend people who knew something, had gone abroad, had degrees or whatever, would go out into all over the place and give lectures and try to educate the community, because Williams felt that you are entering a modern world and completely ignorant. And so you had these voluntary lectures. It was fascinating. people volunteer their time, and one frequently hears that even the current PNM, the word volunteerism. We want people to volunteer. What happened to all these volunteers? I don't know. But here, Dr. Solomon, who was the first Minister of Education and who had participated in such efforts, Sparrow says, Dr. Solomon, he and all was attacked by another gang. Just imagine the Minister of Home Affairs. He and all have to walk with care. But I laugh when he give them the score. He said before they take him, he taken 4. But if they tackle me, my friend, they have to multiply 4 by 10. And that's 40. I don't tell my friends and my family not to worry. You know this thing. You see the graduates from the curriculum of the street. Huh? No. Now here you have an interesting thing. The minister is threatened, and he reacts like a gunslinger who has been called out. He adopts the falsely heroic, violent rhetoric and register of the street. Now this does not signal his oneness with the street, but on the contrary, it signals a breakdown, a failure, the fatuity even of those earlier efforts to illuminate a community comfortable with its own darkness and capable of reducing educated national island scholars and dedicated PNM missionaries to its own level of histrionic encounter and rhetoric. I want you to think of that and to consider whether this is not happening right now. The Rebel, 1966, is unique because Sparrow creates in this calypso the persona of a young Bajon in formation. He's not a Bajon, but he's a Bajon in formation, who portrays himself as having been the innocent victim of his social environment. The streets where he receives his informal education have their own curriculum and professors. Foremost among these professors are bullying older males, all of them Bajons, who handle the protagonist violently. They commit crimes and sometimes pranks for which the protagonist is blamed and punished. Secondly, the teachers in school, particularly the headmaster, who doesn't sympathize with his situation and eventually expels him. Well, I know about those headmasters. I had an encounters with my own headmaster. Thirdly, there are the parents who put him out from home when he is expelled from school. His self-portrait is that of an innocent, misunderstood scapegoat and a victim of the perverse masculinity of his world, that of the city. He grew up in town, and perhaps his village or block within that town. This perverse masculinity demands a constant, violent testing and initiation, a putting down and a putting in place of the young neophyte who, socialized into a sans humanité environment, absorbs its values of confrontation of the other, perceived as enemy, and of harboring thoughts of future revenge. There are borders in this world of the city street, raised to separate small man, that is little boy. But you can't call a little boy a little boy. He's a small man. And there's a border there's a border between the small man and the youth man. That is the teenager. And both of them have to face the border, the barrier separating them from the big man, that is the adult male. There are also harsh rites of passage from one stage to the next. The rebel describes the street education and testing of one of these young males as he progresses from small man to youth man, about to graduate into the full or empty manhood. The status of Bad John and rebel grown strong enough to challenge his former persecutors. Grown up, the protagonist now welcomes the aging Bad Johns of his youth, who it seems have grown weak and vulnerable. Now that they need compassion, he will not be the one to provide it. This is his time to play. Not Bad John, he never admits to having grown into and become the mask he most deeply hates, but rebel. So that's my sort of analysis of that calypso. And if you ask why we cannot solve our problems of education, it's not just because the system of education doesn't provide opportunities for a variety of types of education, but because there are barriers there kind of ingrown, implanted, and I don't know exactly how you remove them.
Yeah. Okay, so Gordon, first of all, I want to make an observation, and then lead from that observation into a kind of a loaded question. Your observation go kind of like ramble a little bit, because I was listening to like when you were quoting some of the lines from the Calypso the Rebel, and I'm listening to the women in there, the people in the audience saying some of the lines, and I could say some of those lines too. All right, so first the observation begins with the observation that someone like Sparrow was a public intellectual. Understand? And there's one thing you pointed out about Calypso, that it is an intellectualism, a public intellectualism, which is very much the tradition that you are in. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know.
No, well, yeah, no, seriously, because okay.
I'm an Afro-Saxon.
Yeah. No, because you see, okay. Yeah. So like you've always been situated within academia.
Yeah.
And yet, anybody who's interested enough can read what you wrote and connect it with what is going on around them. So that's given. Now, there's been, as for decades now, a trend within academia where, honestly, people, I'm a writer, I'm into literature, I can't read the blasted things. That is me. And it's not I'm not interested. I'm interested. So I'm kind of curious about how you see, when names come to mind like Barthes and Foucault and Derrida and so on. Yeah. I'm kind of curious to see how you take in this phenomenon of that kind of criticism, that kind of observation, entering academia. How come you never got tied in it? What are your views on it? What you see what I'm saying? What you see as necessary to ground the work of academia, particularly in literature, back in our normal concerns.
I was just too stupid to understand those things. No, I tried a little bit with it, but I could make it. And I saw a whole generation arise who seemed to be able to handle that. And I say, well, that's all right. I'm going to try to read you guys, but I've had a similar experience to you. No, being serious.
I don't believe you, right? But
being serious now,
yeah.
I feel that we are in a situation where we really do not know ourselves. we don't, when I worked on Calypso and Society in the, what do you call the thing, in the archives, I saw a lot of stuff in that archives that I am sure even the people who are working there don't know anything about them. They had records in folders with the name, with numbers on it, but hardly anything else, no titles or anything. So if you're studying something that happened in those days, I don't know how it is now, but if you are studying something that happened in 1936, you get a whole pile of folders on 1936, and you have to go through each one to find out what is going on inside.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
And so I realized that there is a whole lot of data, a whole lot of history, which if we knew might transfigure our vision of ourselves and of the society. But we don't know, and we happily don't know.
Why don't we know?
Well, I suggested to
I'm not going to let you off the hook so easy.
I suggested to the archivist that they employ, not pay, but just employ students of history and sociology in the vacation. They have these long papers to write, and their job would be to read these files and to make a note of what is in the file so that you could get, indexes.
Okay, all right.
Cross-referencing and all this kind of thing. And I told them on my end I will try to work with the departments. They said that they're not going to do that. They're not going to let. In other words, the archival material is not to be touched. and you met people who were very rigid about that. Eh?
Yeah. Okay.
Don't touch our stuff.
Yeah.
Even in the UWI library,
right.
you might find that attitude.
Yeah. Okay.
I used to walk all over the library
and
in the West Indian section in those days, and I found all kinds of things that they didn't know was there. But nowadays you can't do that. You have to tell them what you want to see.
Okay.
But this is precisely the problem. You don't know what you want to see.
All right. So so I'm hearing that, and I'm seeing that as a specific problem. But I want to zero in on something else. Okay. So so at St. Augustine, Mona, Caville, a number of places like this, there's new kind of criticism coming in. I threw out a few names: Derrida, Foucault, etc., etc. You're there among academia, and I'm wondering. So you're seeing this coming in. You're seeing this kind of this other kind of way, death of the author and those things. You're seeing those kinds of ways of looking at literature, the relationship of literature to society. You're seeing those things coming in. I'm trying to understand, what was your response to it? Was this something that you questioned, how relevant this was? You see what I'm saying? That you try to see, no, there's another way to do this. There are other kinds of courses that need to bring in. I'm trying to see what was your experience of being in that milieu when those other ways of trying to make us look at ourselves are coming in. How you dealt with it?
I was never in that milieu. That's why I am a bookman.
Okay.
A bookman is outside of that kind of thing. He has his own vision.
Okay.
He does his own thing.
Okay.
And he applies just common sense to the stuff that he digs up, that he finds. And hopefully, out of all of that, something that can be termed theory, but is relevant to us, will emerge. I found that people look for a theoretical model that often had nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
Okay, they apply the model to the work and discover that the model does not fit the work. What do they then do? They chop the work. Chop off this bit. You're not fitting my theory. They chop the work and they produce something that fits the theory, but is not at all true. to work.
But some of those persons who doing that, who are persons who came under your tutelage, who had your example, and they became academics. How come they didn't? You also said, how come they didn't do what you did?
Well, I don't know. They must have recognized how stupid I was. I decided that, look, we ain't going to worry with this. No, it's a question of not trusting ourselves. It's not trusting our own vision, and of wanting to seek validation from outside. That's a very colonial thing, my dear.
But I would add to that this is not a solely Caribbean issue. It's an issue in British universities where constantly you find postgraduate students who can't actually read properly, who gob up chunks of undigested critical theory, but then show no sensitivity at all in reading things. So it isn't just a Caribbean thing. I think I guess that there's a kind of anxiety that, unless you can prove you can do this thing, you're no good, which is rubbish. Let me just come on to, briefly kind of allude to My Strangled City. My Strangled City has a lot of focus around 1970.
Yeah.
There's one of the things I love about that book is that the biggest, most, sort of really important essay, because I think if you want to understand 1970, that essay and looking at how writers responded to that period is so critically important. The sad thing is that the anthology that it was meant to introduce never actually appeared. But, the essay is there and the poems are there. One of the things, when I read that, and I was just reading something else, and Kamau, you also worked hugely on Kamau Brathwaite. And I was just reading something else of Kamau Brathwaite's Leopard. Yeah. That one. So I will read it very badly. His terror cage still paces, turns again and paces, time ticks still. Which one of you, with doubting, peering faces, will return to where this future paces and dare to let it out? Yeah. Do you want to respond to that?
Yes, it's a very dreadful kind of thing. It's an image of a leopard in a zoo. And this leopard seems to represent a kind of almost defeated ancestral consciousness, defeated manhood, defeated warriorhood, defeated rage almost. But the leopard is not fully domesticated. He keeps pacing, he keeps trying to see how he could get out of the cage. He probably never will. Now I think that leopard represents something deep in us, a buried anger, a buried violence. And Kamau is saying, okay, how are we going to rebel? How are we going to break out? How are we going to break loose? Are we strong enough, brave enough to even visit that part of ourselves, let alone release it? There are all sorts of things that arise from that, and that is Brathwaite's treatment of violence and rebellion and the revolution, which is often an examination of the failure of those things, in at least in the New World Caribbean context. But although we fail, there's always the possibility that we will try again and might succeed. And there is a notion of history as what I think East Africans call Zamani. Zamani is a concept of the cyclic nature of history. And it posits that our future is to curve back to our past. Our future is to join the world of the ancestors who are already there, were already there. And our future is also to revisit those areas of consciousness in ourselves that we think are lost, and that we direct against each other blindly.
Yeah.
And he's asking, well, you know, do we dare do this?
Okay.
Do we dare do this?
So I'm asking you, do you think we dare do this? Are you hopeful? Real and true. I mean, you're sitting there now, so you've done all the work you did. Looking at now, Trinidad, the Caribbean, 2019. You look into the next 5 years. Are you hopeful?
Hopeful. I am not strong on hope or faith. I am sometimes a little charitable, but, but faith and hope, I'm not too strong on those things. Listening to Fela Kuti looking at Nigeria and his pronouncement on his own generation and his own people is that we scatter.
Yeah.
We so scatter, not just fragmented, but the fragments are dispersed all over the place. And the question is, how do you bring these fragments together to create some kind of whole, which again is a question that Brathwaite keeps asking.
Yeah, okay.
The relationship between our fragmentation and our potential wholeness. Am I hopeful?
Yeah. Are you seeing any signs that make you think, all right, there's a possibility in this going on there. There's a possibility in that. You're not saying it will happen, but you've seen possibilities that make you think it could happen.
Okay, let me read you a piece of something that that critiques, in a way, the bookman.
All right, okay.
Critiques the kind of person that I am, who sees all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Who sees all kinds of things, but, you know, believe that, you know, I mean, I've seen so many fires.
Yeah.
Georgetown burned down.
Right.
Port of Spain burned down. I wrote a little couplet, writing my time. My time? No time again. Wreck of Georgetown. Ruin of Port of Spain. Now, writing out of that desolation is very difficult. But it's necessary to try. So I'm gonna give you a little thing.
Okay.
Yes, you see. Okay. Yes. Yeah, this is from the Dream Diary, and this is a dream that occurred long after I left UWI. It's called There Must Be Angels, and it's in two sections. The first one is called Full Frontal, and the second one is called Angel. Full Frontal. I park my car in the vicinity of a car park, close to the faculty of farts, and walk towards my old department to check for mail. I am naked. I mean no clothes at all. I mean nude, man, bare-assed, uncovered, Adamic. I near a stairway. A woman sees me and looks away, maybe in alarm, more likely in amusement. I enter the departmental office, checking for mail with my right hand, covering my privates with my left, and wishing to find a few fig leaves to cover my donkey. I am not certain if anyone else is in the office. This is a dream, eh? Maybe Maybe the censor played Good Angel and deleted the grinning audience. I hope so. Wouldn't like this sort of posterior image to get into Facebook or YouTube and become accessible to posterity. I'm in room 328, my old office. I don't know how I got in or where I had the key stored on my naked body. Don't ask, don't tell. But I am in the old office where I find the clothes in the bottom drawer of a desk. They are rather crumpled, but they are clothes. I prepare to put them on and face the world, full frontal. Now, Angel. Leaving room 328, I turn south towards the seminar room where registration for the new semester is taking place. When I spot Fenwick Bailey's broad, flashing smile. A schoolboy who may be Fenwick's son or grandson walks past the registration room which Fenwick has entered to, it seems, register for one of the faculty's New Life for Geriatrics postgraduate courses. I follow his son or grandson, difficult to say with many of these old men, who turns the corner, thrusts his legs, and slips through a space in the concrete border of the corridor. He falls 2 stories down, headfirst into a pool of muddy water. There is a backpack on his back, and he sinks into the pool. I try to shout, scream, call out, but no sound comes from my mouth. I see a female student jump into the pool to pull him out, and I return to the seminar room to tell his father, grandfather, what has happened, but can't find Fenwick anywhere. I wonder what all this signifies. So many sons slipping and falling headlong to drown in murky water or dash their brains out on indifferent concrete. So many handsome, disappearing fathers, so many helpless, voiceless, useless bookmen, watching from remote balconies, wearing their ancient, obsolete rags, paralyzed in these end times. But there are angels. The female student who jumped into the pool to pull the boy out was one of these. Now consider this reenactment of that dream in real life. Towards the end of August and the beginning of September 2012, barely a fortnight after the Yui dream, a 5-year-old boy slipped through the rails of the stairs of the Dos Santos stand at Queen's Park Oval cricket ground and fell 50 feet to the concrete beneath, sustaining only a cut chin. He had broken away from the supervision of his father. There must be angels occasionally in charge. Sometimes, as in Dream Yui, we see them. Sometimes, as at Queen's Park, we don't. But there must be angels. Now,
So you're answering my question about if there's hope.
okay, yeah?
I say you're answering my question about whether you see hope.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Just one thing.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that in this society, there are all sorts of angels. There are all kinds of people. Some of them are non-government organizations, charitable groups. You know, they work with young people, and they are not often recognized as much as they should be. And I think that they are a source of a wellspring of hope. I ain't one of them, but
That's all right.
they exist. they exist. And I would argue for their recognition, and I'm a little sorry that I've never really researched them, but there are a lot of young people with theory at their disposal who I hope can do that kind of work. So, okay.
I'm getting signals from the front that our time is up. I'm sure you could have sat here for another couple of hours at least, listening to Gordon. But there are other things planned, and I think now is the time to finish the evening. Nicholas, you want to say something?
I'm just going to say that maybe it's a good time to draw this conversation to a close, but have a different kind of conversation, because given the kind of work and the range of work that, that Gordon Rohlehr has done over his life, it may be interesting to continue this conversation in poetry and in song. So I think what we're going to do now is, first I'm going to ask you just to, applaud this conversation that we've been listening to. Kendall Hippolyte is already up on stage, and as many of you know, he's here at the festival this year to launch his new book, Word Planting, and there is an extraordinary poem in that book that's dedicated to Gordon Rohlehr, so I would love to ask Kendall to come and read that poem. After which, we could not do this without a little bit of Brathwaite. So Anu Lakan, sitting in the audience, who, remember at the beginning I said that, there's whole generations of UE students who basically fell in love with Professor Rohlehr at first class. I think Anu would probably admit that she belongs to that group. She's going to be reading a poem from Kamau Brathwaite for us. And then after that, we're going to have a bit of music. So, Kendall.
Thank you. Sometime toward the end of last year, I found myself beginning to read my Strangled City all over again. I just felt like I kind of needed to get my bearings in all what was going on around me. And that was what I found myself turning to, to situate myself within Caribbean poetry. But before that, couple of years before, and I'd written this poem. I don't know that I consciously knew what the inspiration for it was, but after I'd written it, I can't remember what the process of thought was that told me, but this is Gordon's poem. This poem would not have been written without Gordon. So, the poem is called Avocado. It's a bit of a long-ass poem, so I'll try to move it through here. Yeah, all right. Avocado. It's for Gordon Rohlehr. I woke one morning and the Caribbean was gone. She'd definitely been there the night before. I'd heard her singing in crickets and grasshoppers to the tambourine of the oncoming rain. A childhood song. I slept down into childhood. I woke, blinking in a null glare, without sunbeams, with no winkling motes, all things bright and 20/20 visible in neon, but unilluminated. And though the finches, doves, banana quits, tremblers, grackles, mockingbirds sang to each other still, their music ended when the singing ended. Not like the day before, when what they sang were motifs in an overture, a maypole reeling and unreeling of ourselves and other cells of nature, swirling in a future-original circle of civilization, entitling itself Caribbean. I thought, she can't be gone. If she is gone, what is this place? If she is gone, who am I? If she is gone, who braids the fraying fibers of memory into a cord? Traces the beach footprints of our children back to the first tracks of the Siboney? Who plats the scattered flowers of islands and the sprigs of continent into a votive wreath? Cast in appeasement on the ocean, restless with the unrestituted dead, to see us into the altering calm of Sunday mornings, trees in surpluses of light, and the allaying litany of the waves asking and the sands assenting. I thought, she isn't gone, just hidden. I'll go find her. And so I went looking. I went first to the beach, of course, remembering how she loved fluidities, the wavering margins of the sand and water, the way that wind could soothe the stinging of the sun's rays. The original elements, she said, dwelling within themselves while intermingling. But at the beach, the barricades of deck chairs, the ramparts of pastel walls blocked any wandering. A non-pastel guard, though, told me he had glimpsed her walking off between clipped hedges that closed after her into a maze. Tatters of madras hanging where there used to be hibiscus. There had been rumors of hotel managers trying to hire the sunlight, contract the hurricane into a breeze for gently fluttering brochures, draw columns of strict profit margins permanently on the sand. And the Caribbean, sensing the intimation of quick crab-like hands, crawling to get underneath the white broderie anglaise of her skirt, withdrew herself the way the sea, clenching herself into a tidal wave, withdraws. I left the beach, wandering my way back toward a town still struggling toward a city, looking for her as I used to in an unexpectedness of roadside flowers. A sudden glorying of croton plashing against a low grey house, a slump of cane leaning into the road, just so, beside a shack. And it was strange, their way now of receding from me while remaining into the town, following the fade-out track of a child's footsteps into memory, or perhaps trailing the underscent of hot molasses, a history's black sweat. I dipped into the volatile conviviality of rum shops, a ricochet of dominoes, cracking reports of man-to-man talk, slam of coins on counter, brawling laughter half an inch short of a fight, bottle tippling, rum settling everything. The rituals exactly as they were when I was small and 9, and she walked the whole neighborhood. I asked the rum acolytes, who unbowed their heads from drinks and swore. She had just been there, They asked me where she had gone. I left them in a spluttering fusillade of words about who had seen her last. And I stepped into a Saturday morning of a market hopscotched with vendors. Their come-to-me calls crisscrossing in a bird flight chattering. Their seasonings, vegetables, fruits set out in clusters, brèves, crochets, minims of aubergine and pomerac and thyme along the staves of footpaths. And I thought, okay, surely somewhere within this kente tatan madras self-arranging medley, this market woman melody within sound and smell of the hot pepper sizzling of Accra, I will find her. Tell you the truth, there was one moment. A woman sitting, thighs akimbo, the cascade of her wide blue skirt falling towards the plenitude that she had gathered from a hillside garden, from the abundance of her country where land is still the earth, called out to me, one hand holding the green orb of an avocado. Solina, friend, for you. And then the ceremonies of thanks, gracious inquiries, regards, bye-bye. And somewhere in this intermingling, although I didn't know the moment, between her fingers loosening and mine tightening around, both of us holding, neither of us quite owning what she was giving me, what I was accepting in that green present, which I received really only later that day when I'd stopped looking and realization ripened like a fruit or vegetable or whatever people call an avocado. I'll skip a whole set of it because it's kind of long, and I'll just go near down to the end of it, yeah? Time on us. Okay. Really? Had a market woman hand raised with a gift from her to me through Solina. In that casual gesture, trace the curving line that rounds into community? Romanticism, surely. Yet, how else, through centuries of the stock exchange of flesh, glistened black bodies, tarnished silver coins, transacted on an auction block, how else had the bought and sold survived within their own unchatteled selves? Gift, the unslaved remembering of hands held out with no calculating fingers, offering the graciousness that grows out of a ground of knowing. Existence is a grace. Grace eliding into graciousness, eliding into gift, the first fruits of civilization. And since that glimpse, like a green flash, I've seen her, the Caribbean, in unexpected places. Her visitations are a gleam and then a dimming. A far hillside district, descendant of a Freetown settlement in the midday light. Or a glint of zinc from a house changing half of its roof on a Saturday half day, given to a Kudme, Lenhan, Gayap, Kobit, Fajina, Jollification, Maroon, Gotong Rojong, or whatever people say to try to nail with names the element beyond grasp, above our heads, holding the sheltering, restored roof of community in place. It's harder to find now, and when found, best held lightly, in an open palm, then unheld. Let go. In an unexpecting, free hand, green, thankful of avocado. I give thanks to God.
The literal manifestation of setting the bar too high. So as Nicholas said, I'm an unapologetic admirer and semi-adorer of Professor Rohlehr. Thank you. Yeah, that'll do. Just before I read the poem by Camus, wanted to say, I don't know how I would know myself without Gordon. And part of the discussion earlier was about how we don't know ourselves. I kind of do know myself, and it is because of him, because he has been thinking about us, about the Caribbean and about the world and about the Caribbean world for so long, and so relevantly and so timely, always, and so accessibly, so always accessibly, unlike some other names that I don't need to repeat. And I think that's the thing. I think there might have been some sort of commitment to being accessible and staying in conversation and not casting the rest of us out or making us live in really difficult dictionaries. Beyond the shadow of a doubt, Gordon has the most enviable mind that I have ever met. He's impressed by an index, but I know no one who can cross-reference like him. He can talk about the Sahara dust and Shakespeare in the same sentence and make it make sense and make it be funny. So thank you. And now, not trying to dishonor Camus in any way, I'm going to do my best. This is Ja, which amazingly is a Camus poem that has actual words and not just symbols, and I needed words and punctuation. Nairobi's male elephants uncurl their trumpets to heaven. Toot Toot takes it up in Havana. In Harlem, bridges the sound curve through the pale rigging of saxophone stops. The ship sails, slips on banana peel water, eating the dark men. Has the quick drummer nerves after the stink Sabbath's unleavened cries in the hot hull? From the top of the music, Slack Bwana Columbus rides out of the jungle's den. With my blue note, my cracked note, full flattened fifth, my 10 bebop fingers, my black bottom strut, Panama work song, my cabin, my hut, my new frigged up soul, and God's heaven, heaven gonna walk all over God's heaven. I furl away from the trumpet. My bridge stops in the New York air. Elevator speeds me to angels. Heaven sways in the reinforced girders. God is glass with his typewriter teeth. Gospel jumps and pings off the white paper higher and higher. The eagle's crook neck, the vulture's talons clutching tight as a baby's fist, still knows the beat of the root blood up through the rocks, up through the torn hummingbird trees, guitar strings, eerie. The buffaloes boom through the dust plains. The antelopes sniff at the water. Elan's sudden hurl through the hurdle of fire runnels upwards to them through the hoof of the world. But here, God looks out over the river, yellow mix of the neon lights, high up over the crouching cottonwool green, and we float high up over the size of the city like fish in a gold water world. We float round and round in the bright bubbled bowl without hope of the hook of the fisherman's tugging in root, eyes without bait, snout without words, teeth with nothing to kill, skill of fin for a child's wonder, pale scales for collectors to sell. And God, big eyes bulging, his glass house a globe, floating, floating in heaven, without feet, without wind, without wing, without thunder, no stone under him, no sound to carry earth up to his fathoms, no ground to keep him down near the gods. For the land has lost the memory of the most secret places. We see the moon, but cannot remember its meaning. A dark skin is a chain, but it cannot recall the name of its tribe. There are no chiefs in the village. The gods have been forgotten or hidden. A prayer poured on the ground with water, with rum, will not bid them come back. Creation has burned to a spider. It peeps over the hills with the sunrise, but prefers to spin webs in the trees. The sea is a divider. It is not a life giver. Time's river. The islands are the humped backs of mountains, green turtles that cannot find their way. Volcanoes are voiceless. They have shut their red eyes to the weather. The sun that was once a doom of gold to the Arawaks is now a flat boom in the sky. And the bit that's Anansi. With a black snake's unwinking eye, thinking through glass, through quartz, quarries of stony water, with a doll's liquid gaze, crystal, his brain green, a green chrysalis, storing leaves, memories, trunked up in a dark attic. He stumps up the stairs of our windows. He stares. He squats on the tips of our language, black burr of conundrums, eye corner of ghosts, ancient histories. He spins drum beats, silver skin, webs of sound through the villages. Taki heard him, and Louverture, all the hungry, dumb-bellied chieftains who spat their death into the ground. Guave, Port-au-Prince, Half Moon Fort, villages, dead lobster pot crews, wire, red seashells, coconut trees, hulls, nodding skulls, black iron bells, clogged no glamour of the noon on the mangrove shore. Now the poor hang him up in the ceiling. Their brooms cannot reach his hushed corner, and he sits with the dust, desert's rainfall of soot, plotting a new fall from heaven, threading the moonlight stories, his full mouth agape, a black pot, grinning, round fire that boils in his belly, Wallaby wood, words, eyes, fireflies, sparks, crashing coals, waterfalls, grey ashes aroused old men's ghosts, cinders, burnt memories, eyes in the hot hut, flesh curling silver, revealing their shadows of meaning as the god stares down, black beating heart of him breathing, consuming our wood, the words of our houses, black iron-eyed eater, the many-eyed maker, creator, dry stony world maker, word breaker, creator. In the yard, the dog barks at the stranger. Thank you.
I'm just a little bit taller than Anu. So we've had some poetry, and there's no way we can properly launch this book, and there's no way we can end the evening without some calypso. So I don't know if you gentlemen are comfortable on stage or would like to get comfortable in the audience, but we're about to welcome Mr. David Barrow, who is going to serenade all of us, and in particular the author of the book. Let's give him a round of applause to welcome him.
Okay, so I hear all you just now, right? Long time calypsonians were very good. They used to sing as they really should. Carnival day was hot like France, and people up and down behind them like ants. And when they chant this minor love way, young girls used to jump up, don't believe it. And when they sing ratty rim and the whole crowd goes away. Santi Manit, what friends they had, no orchestra, was the bottle and spoon and the soul guitar. And them days the qualified musician was this fella beating up the child pan, and he singing ratty ray to jump and break away. Santi Manit, long time minor tunes was so sweet. Calypsonians used to catch women with the beat. Just give them a hat, a shoes and so forth, with couple yards of trilly cloth. And next year when they make the dress, they coming back to hear minor of the press. You could have sing ratty ray and raise the trilly, but still they had no orchestra, was the bottle and spoon and the soul guitar. And them days the qualified musician was this fella beating up the child pan, and he singing ratty ray to jump and break away. Long time calypsonians had plenty fame, was by singing minor they get the name. And when you hear the tambour band pass, if you're willing or not, you're bound to play mass. A fella left the bathroom hurry like France, forget he just haul off the underpants. Still he raise up his shot and start to prance and break away. And the money day, yes, they had no orchestra, was the bottle and spoon and the soul guitar. And them days they qualified Beethoven, was this fella beating the oil pan, and they singing ratty ray to jump and break away. Santi Manite. Nice. Ladies and gentlemen, a special round of applause. Marvin Newton on guitar. Oh, you heard the man identified the Bajan days of long time. Carnival of yesteryear was a very violent time. So join me with this one. Musty Fay, meet me down by the crazy Potota. Meet me down by, sing this song. Musty Fay, meet me down by the crazy Potota. Meet me down by, only waiting on this carnival is to jump up with these criminals. I'm going to arm myself with a big stick. Any man in tongue and me that is relics. But I don't tell mommy already. Mommy, do tie up your belly. Cause it's murder federation with war and rebellion when they bar me by the junction. I'm going to be famous today. Meet me down by the crazy Potota. Meet me down, sing the song. Must be Fay. Meet me down by the crazy Potota. Monday morning I wake it early to drink a vat to steam up my body. And I jumping up like a crazy. I alone going collapse the city with the razor tie on to me free. I like a patron in the 18th century. I don't stick in my waist. A chipping in space is to spit in them badge on feet. Look at one dog. I like that. Meet me down like the crazy Potota. Meet me one more time. Musty Fay. I hear him. This sixth brother-in-law, God rest his soul, Dennis Banton. I hear him singing this with me now. Sing it. Musty Fay. Meet me down by the crazy Potota. Meet me. Talk about bad. Well, my right hand is my steel knuckle to show you I in for trouble. Me took in my left pocket. Boys, me pour you under my jacket. And I jumping up like a bow wife. I know the bronco say that is old style. But they could beat me like a child, I take a lick with a smile. And a painting boy like a wife. And Musty Fay, meet me down by the crazy Potota. Meet me down, sing the song. Musty Fay, meet me down by the crazy Potota. Well, as man I consult me doctor to check me lungs and me liver. I don't pay off my lawyer so he could pay off me undertaker. And as I have no mother, no father, they could post me back to Grenada. Cause I tell Mr. Chance I don't pay in advance to bury me down in Gunners. Let you come with him. Meet me down by the crazy Potota. Meet me down by the, sing the song. Musty Fay. Meet me down by the crazy Potota. Meet me one more time. Musty Fay. Meet me down by the crazy Potota. Meet me down by Green Corner. Sire, everything in order? One of the things we like to do whenever we share some vintage Kaiser with audiences, of course, invite the audience to sing along. Oh, this song really nice. Marva, you may find this song nice. Wonderful. And it is often said that the history of Trinidad and Tobago can be mapped in the calypsos through the years. And this is a song that really perhaps can attest to that, because in 1966, they catch a priest playing mass. Yeah? You remember that? They catch a priest playing mass. It was an Anglican priest called Father Clifford Hendy. And in 1967, Dillery Scott, Mighty Cypher, did this song and he win the Calypso King title in 67. I know you all know this one. So I know you're going to join. Last Carnival, you're talking about Bacchanal. Last Carnival, you're talking about Bacchanal. Some people from Dabani, all of them the same family. Mildred throw rum inside a glass and hand his sister while playing man shouting, if the priest could play, who is we? And I'm from Dabani. If the priest could play, who is we? I don't care who see. If the priest could play, who is we? You're talking about Bacchanal. If the priest could play, who is we? I mean for the carnival. If the priest could play, who is we? Hey, I'm a man. If the priest could play, who is we? These people had a law never to play mass before. But since they see the priest play, they decide to break away. These girls in the tight pants had the whole public in trance. The brother wearing his sister dress with orange tie up on his chest, singing, if the priest could play, who is we? And I from the body, if the priest could play, who is we? I don't care who see, if the priest could play, who is we? Talking about bacchanal, if the priest could play, who is we? Yeah, I'm in for the carnival. If the priest could play, who is we? Oh, I's a man. If the priest could play, who is we? What made the band first class? Everyone play a different mass. Some playing police and thief, some playing arrest the priest. A fella they call choke up, tie his neck with a bonga rope. He lay down on the ground and close his eyes. Oh, you know, he playing commit suicide, singing, if the priest could play, who is we? I found the body. If the priest could play, who is we? I don't care who see. If the priest could play, who is we? You're talking about bacchanal. If the priest could play, who is we? Hey, that is carnival. If the priest could play, who is we? You see the priest. You think they used to whine so long time?